Some songs are more than just melodies. Some songs have the power to change destinies. In 1968, the song What a Wonderful World was playing on radios across the world, though America had not yet fully embraced it. But in the streets of Harlem, the children knew every word by heart. On a cold winter evening, an 11-year-old boy named Danny Mitchell stood on a corner, singing that very song to passers-by who rushed past without stopping. His voice trembled from the cold, but he kept singing because singing was all he had. That same evening, Louis Armstrong took a walk through Harlem, a neighborhood he rarely visited anymore. Why he chose that particular route on that particular night, he could never explain. Perhaps it was nostalgia. Perhaps it was restlessness. Or perhaps it was something bigger than either of them could understand. When Louis turned the corner and heard his own song floating through the freezing air, sung by a shivering child with desperate hope in his eyes, he stopped. Millions of people knew that song. But something in the way this boy sang it reached deep into Louis Armstrong's soul and pulled out memories he had tried to forget for 60 years. If you believe in the power of kindness and the magic of unexpected moments, make sure to subscribe to this channel. This is a story that will stay with you long after it ends. But to understand why that encounter meant so much and why Louis Armstrong could not simply walk away, we need to go back. Back to understand who Louis Armstrong really was, and back to understand the boy who stood singing on that frozen street corner. The information in this video is compiled from documented interviews, archival news, books, and historical reports. For narrative purposes, some parts are dramatized and may not represent 100% factual accuracy. We also use AI-assisted visuals and AI narration for cinematic reconstruction. The use of AI does not mean the story is fake. It is a storytelling tool. Our goal is to recreate the spirit of that era as faithfully as possible. Enjoy watching. Louis Armstrong was 67 years old in 1968, and he had lived one of the most remarkable lives in American history. From the desperate poverty of New Orleans to the grandest stages in the world, Louis had traveled a journey that seemed impossible. He had changed the sound of music itself. His face was recognized on every continent. And yet, despite all his success, Louis Armstrong never forgot where he came from. He had been born in 1901 in a neighborhood so poor that people called it Bacco Town. His father abandoned the family before Louis could form memories of him. His mother struggled to survive. Young Louis knew hunger as a constant companion. By the time he was 7, he was already working, selling newspapers before dawn, delivering coal, and singing on street corners, hoping strangers might toss coins his way. Those early years never left him, no matter how famous he became. Have you ever had an experience from childhood that shaped who you became? Share your story in the comments. When Louis was 11 years old, the same age as Danny Mitchell would be on that cold night in Harlem, something happened that could have destroyed his life. On New Year's Eve in 1912, young Louis fired a gun into the air during street celebrations. He was arrested and sent to the Colored Waifs Home for Boys, a reform school. His mother wept, and Louis found himself locked away from everything he knew. But that reform school became the greatest gift of his life. The school had a brass band led by a teacher named Peter Davis. Louis begged to join, volunteering for extra chores just to be near the instruments. First a tambourine, then drums, then a bugle, and finally a cornet was placed in his hands. The moment Louis put that instrument to his lips, something magical happened. Louis never forgot Peter Davis or that gift. Throughout his career, he made it a point to help young musicians whenever he could, quietly supporting countless aspiring artists who reminded him of his younger self. For Louis, success was never just about personal achievement. It was about lifting others up. In 1967, Louis Armstrong recorded What a Wonderful World. The song was written specifically for him by Bob Thiele and George David Weiss, but the recording almost never happened. The head of ABC Records thought it was too simple and refused to promote it. In America, the song barely made a ripple. But something remarkable happened overseas. In England, the song reached number 1 and stayed there for weeks. People around the world fell in love with its gentle optimism, its reminder that even in dark times, there is beauty to be found. If you are enjoying this story, please like this video and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to you. By 1968, What a Wonderful World had become one of the most recognized songs in the world. For Louis, it was more than just another hit. It was a statement of faith, a declaration that despite everything he had endured, he still believed the world was wonderful. 1968 was a difficult year for America. The nation was torn apart by conflict and tragedy. Martin Luther King Jr. was lost in April. Robert Kennedy in June. The Vietnam War continued to divide families. It was a year when hope seemed in short supply. Danny Mitchell knew nothing of politics. He was 11 years old with sandy brown hair and eyes that had seen too much hardship. His father had left when Danny was a toddler. His mother worked 2 jobs, leaving before Danny woke and returning after he slept. They lived in a small apartment in Harlem, and every penny mattered. Danny had started singing on street corners a few months earlier, not because anyone taught him, but because he noticed people sometimes dropped coins when a child sang prettily. He did not think of himself as a musician. He thought of himself as someone trying to help his mother survive. Danny had learned what a wonderful world by listening to it on a neighbor's radio. Something about the song spoke to him. The lyrics talked about trees of green, skies of blue, friends shaking hands. For a boy whose life contained little of that wonder, the song was like a window into a different world. On that cold evening in December, Danny took his usual position near 125th Street. The wind cut through his thin jacket, people rushed past, heads down, nobody stopped. But Danny kept singing because stopping meant giving up. He was halfway through What a Wonderful World when he noticed an older black man in an expensive coat standing at the edge of the sidewalk. The man was not walking past, he was standing still, watching Danny with an expression the boy could not read. There was something in the man's eyes that looked almost like recognition. Louis Armstrong had not planned to be in Harlem that evening. He lived in Queens now, in a comfortable house with his wife Lucille, far from the bustling streets of Manhattan. His doctors had been telling him to rest, to take it easy, to remember that his heart was not as strong as it used to be. But Louis had never been good at sitting still. He had spent his entire life in motion, traveling from city to city, stage to stage, always chasing the next performance, the next connection with an audience. That afternoon he had felt restless in a way he could not explain. He told Lucille he was going for a drive just to clear his head. He ended up in Harlem, parking his car and walking through streets that reminded him of a different time, a different life. He was not sure what he was looking for. Maybe he was looking for his past. Maybe he was looking for himself. When he heard the boy singing his song, Louis stopped walking. The voice was not trained or polished. It cracked in places and wavered in others. But there was something in it that pierced straight through to Louis's heart. It was the sound of hope fighting against despair. It was the sound of someone refusing to give up even when the whole world seemed determined to ignore them. It was, Louis realized with a start, the sound of his own voice 60 years ago singing on the streets of New Orleans for pennies that might mean the difference between eating and going hungry. What would you do if you heard someone singing your song on a cold street corner? Let us know in the comments. Danny finished the song and looked hopefully at the small crowd that had gathered. A few people tossed coins into his tin can before hurrying away. But the older man in the nice coat did not move. He stood there, watching Danny with those strange, emotion-filled eyes. Then he started walking toward the boy. Danny felt a moment of nervousness. He had learned to be cautious around strangers, especially adults, who paid too much attention to children alone on the street. But there was something about this man's face that made Danny feel safe. The man was smiling, and it was the warmest, the most genuine smile Danny had ever seen. It seemed to light up the entire corner, pushing back the cold and the darkness. The man stopped in front of Danny and looked at him for a long moment without speaking. Then he said something that made Danny's heart nearly stop. He said that Danny had sung that song beautifully. He said that he ought to know, because he was the one who recorded it. Danny stared at the man, not understanding at first. Then recognition slowly dawned. The face, the smile, the gravelly voice that was unmistakable once you really listened. Danny was standing in front of Louis Armstrong. What happened next would stay with Danny Mitchell for the rest of his life. Louis Armstrong, one of the most famous musicians in the world, sat down on a cold bench with an 11-year-old street singer, and I talked to him like he was the most important person in New York City. Louis asked Danny about his life, his family, his dreams. He listened with genuine interest as Danny explained about his mother working 2 jobs, about how he was trying to help, about how much he loved music even though he had never had a lesson in his life. Louis nodded slowly as he listened. Then he told Danny something that the boy would never forget. He told him that he understood because he had been Danny once. He had been a hungry boy singing on street corners, hoping someone would notice, hoping tomorrow would be better than today. He told Danny that the hunger and the struggle were hard, but they did not have to define his whole life. Music could be a way out, a way up, a way to touch people's hearts and change the world. Louis reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He pressed some bills into Danny's hand, more money than the boy had ever held at one time. But then Louis did something even more important than giving money. He asked Danny where he lived, he asked about Danny's mother, he asked if there was a phone where they could be reached. Danny, overwhelmed and confused, answered all the questions honestly. Before Louis left that night, he made Danny a promise. He told the boy that he was going to help him, not just with money for one evening, but with something that would last. He told Danny that talent like his deserved to be nurtured, that no child should have to sing on street corners in the freezing cold just to help pay the rent. He told Danny to keep singing, to keep hoping, to keep believing in that wonderful world even when it seemed very far away. Louis took down Danny's address and his mother's name. He shook the boy's hand like Danny was a fellow adult, an equal, someone worthy of respect. Then Louis Armstrong walked away into the Harlem night, leaving Danny standing on the corner with a handful of money and a head full of wonder. Danny ran home as fast as he could. When he burst through the door and told his mother what had happened, she did not believe him at first. She thought maybe he had met someone pretending to be Louis Armstrong, some kind of trickster or con artist. But Danny was insistent. He described the man, the smile, the voice. He showed her the money, and somewhere in his mother's tired, skeptical heart, a tiny flame of hope began to flicker. Most celebrities, when they encounter touching moments with strangers, quickly forget them amid the chaos of their busy lives. But Louis Armstrong was not most celebrities. He had meant every word he said to Danny Mitchell, and he intended to keep his promise. Within days of that chance encounter, Louis reached out through his network of contacts in the music industry. He asked about music programs for underprivileged children. He inquired about scholarships and lessons and opportunities. Louis also sent money to Danny's mother, enough to ease the burden of their monthly expenses for quite some time. He included a note explaining that he had met her son and been deeply impressed by his talent and his determination. He wrote that he saw something of himself in Danny, something that deserved to be encouraged and supported. He asked her to use the money however she needed, no strings attached, but Louis did not stop there. He arranged for Danny to receive music lessons from a respected teacher, someone who could help develop the raw talent that Louis had heard in that trembling voice on the street corner. He made sure that the lessons were paid for and that transportation would not be a barrier. He checked in periodically to see how Danny was progressing, sending notes of encouragement, and sometimes small gifts. The story of Louis Armstrong and Danny Mitchell was not widely known during Louis's lifetime. He did not do these things for publicity or praise. He did them because they were the right things to do, because he remembered what it felt like to be a struggling child with no one to help, because he believed that success meant nothing if it was not used to lift others up. Danny Mitchell went on to have a very different life than he might have had without that chance encounter. The music lessons Louis provided opened doors that would have otherwise remained firmly closed. Danny developed his voice, learned to read music, and eventually earned a scholarship to study at a performing arts school. He never became as famous as Louis Armstrong, but he built a respectable career as a session singer and music teacher, touching countless lives of his own. Years later, when Danny was asked about the moment that changed his life, he always told the same story. He talked about that cold night in Harlem, about singing "What a Wonderful World" to people who would not even look at him, about the man in the nice coat who stopped and listened. He talked about how Louis Armstrong had treated him with dignity and respect at a moment when he felt invisible and worthless. And he talked about how that kindness had rippled forward through his entire life, inspiring him to help others whenever he had the chance. Louis Armstrong passed away in July of 1971, just a few years after his encounter with Danny Mitchell. The world mourned the loss of one of its greatest musicians, a man whose trumpet and voice had brought joy to millions across generations. But those who knew Louis best understood that his music was only part of his legacy. The other part was his kindness, his generosity, his unwavering belief that every person deserved to be treated with respect and compassion. Throughout his career, Louis had helped countless young musicians in ways that were rarely publicized. He gave lessons for free to those who could not afford them. He recommended talented newcomers for jobs and opportunities. He shared wisdom and encouragement with anyone who asked. And he never forgot what it felt like to be poor and hungry and invisible, which made him incapable of walking past a struggling child without stopping to help. Danny Mitchell attended Louis Armstrong's funeral in Queens. He stood among the thousands of mourners who came to pay their respects, and he thought about that cold night in Harlem when his life had changed forever. He thought about the song that had brought them together, about the wonderful world that Louis had taught him to see, even in the darkest times. And he made a silent promise to carry forward the kindness that had been shown to him, to help others the way Louis had helped him. The song, What a Wonderful World, has taken on even greater meaning since Louis Armstrong's passing. It has been featured in countless films and television shows, played at weddings and funerals, celebrations and memorials. It has become one of the most beloved songs in history. But for Danny Mitchell, the song always meant something more personal. It was the song that had called out to Louis Armstrong on a freezing night in Harlem. It was the song that had connected two souls separated by age and fame, but united by struggle and hope. It was the song that had changed his life, not through any magic in its melody, but through the kindness of the man who sang it. What makes the world wonderful is not just the trees and the roses and the colors of the rainbow. What makes the world wonderful is the people in it who choose kindness over indifference, who stop when others walk past, who see potential in places where others see nothing. Louis Armstrong understood this truth better than almost anyone. He had learned it in the streets of New Orleans, in the Reform School, where he found his calling in every stage and every encounter throughout his remarkable life. And he passed that understanding forward to a shivering boy on a Harlem street corner, who passed it forward to others, who will pass it forward still. That is the true legacy of Louis Armstrong, not just the music, as magnificent as it was, but the reminder that each of us has the power to make someone's world a little more wonderful, simply by stopping, simply by listening, simply by caring. The next time you hear, "What a Wonderful World," remember the man who sang it and the boy who learned its deepest meaning on a cold night when a stranger became a friend. Thank you for watching this incredible story of kindness and hope. If it touched your heart, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to believe that wonderful things can still happen in this world.